welcome Mitch Albom to the first episode of Thinking Aloud. Mitch is the author of numerous books of fiction and nonfiction, which have collectively sold more than 40 million copies in 48 languages worldwide. He's written 8 #1 New York Times bestsellers, including Tuesdays with Morrie, the best-selling memoir of all time, which topped the list for 4 straight years and celebrates its 25th anniversary this year in 2022. Award-winning TV films, stage plays, screenplays, a nationally syndicated newspaper column, and a musical. Through his work at the Detroit Free Press, he was inducted into both the National Sports Media Association and Michigan Sports Hall of Fame, and is the recipient of the 2010 Red Smith Award for Lifetime Achievement. After best-selling memoir Finding Chica and Human Touch, the weekly serial written and published online in real time to raise funds for pandemic relief, his latest work is a return to fiction with the New York Times bestseller, The Stranger in the Lifeboat, which we'll be discussing today. In 2006, he founded the nonprofit Say Detroit, whose operations include a dessert shop, a popcorn line to fund programs for Detroit's most underserved citizens. He also operates an orphanage in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, which he visits monthly. He lives with his wife, Janine, in Michigan. You can learn more about Mitch Albom at www.mitchalbom.com, www.saydetroit.org, and www.havefaithhaiti.org. All of those domains will be up on the screen at the end of our episode. And I want to welcome Mitch Albom to Valley Beth Shalom.
Thank you so much for having me.
So we sit now between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur in this very reflective time of the year for the Jewish people. And I selected your book, The Stranger in the Lifeboat, for our Yom Kippur book club. Tell me a little bit about the genesis of the novel.
Well, in order to understand The Stranger in the Lifeboat, from my perspective, you need to understand the book that preceded it, which was Finding Chica. So Finding Chica was a true story account of a little girl that we adopted from our orphanage in Haiti who had a brain tumor. And, we spent 2 years traveling the world trying to find a cure for her, hoping against hope, against something that they told us from the beginning was going to kill her. She lived 2 years when they said she would live 4 months. And during that 2 years, it was an amazing 2-year time where we got to be parents to this incredible little girl. But of course, she died in the end. And when that happened, I was extremely upset with God and the universe, and as you can imagine. And, I couldn't understand how there could be a benevolent God in the world that couldn't be benevolent to a 7-year-old child who had survived an earthquake, who had lost her mother when she was 2 years old, and who had a brain tumor when she was 5. It just seems so unfair. I wrote the book Finding Chica mostly in pain, I would say, and I did it to kind of as a salve to that pain. After I wrote it, a few years passed, and I began to look at that experience differently. I began to look at it as, why were we given those 2 years with Chica? Myself, my wife, we were in our mid-50s when she came to us. We had always wanted to have children. We didn't have children of our own, even though we've got 60 of them in Haiti. And we had this 2-year opportunity to be parents, really parents. I mean, she slept in the same room as us. She, woke us up for breakfast, all the things that kids do, and I began to look at it as like, this was actually the answer to a prayer that we had made 20 years earlier that we thought wasn't answered. And I started to think about the idea of asking for help and how often we expect help to arrive instantly. Right. And if it doesn't arrive instantly, we're unsatisfied. We're like customers in a deli, and it's like, where's my sandwich? Where's my sandwich? Well, you don't get to tell God, where's my sandwich, even though we feel like we should. Please, God, cure, my husband just went into the hospital, cure him today, and when he's not cured today, we're disappointed. So I recognize that this was actually a delayed answer to a prayer that we made a while ago. And I started to think, wouldn't this be an interesting premise for a story that people who are in dire need of help get the help but don't recognize it when it comes, because it didn't come in the form that they thought it did. And that led me to the concept of 10 people in a lifeboat, all crying out for help, abandoned, lost, running out of food, running out of water, sharks in the water. The worst thing that I could, that'd be the worst death I could possibly imagine for myself, would be in one of those life rafts. And then suddenly they discover a body in the water. And when they pull the body in, he says he's God, and they don't believe him. And I thought, wow, that's a very interesting premise. What happens if we call out for God and someone shows up and says, I'm God, and we go, no, you're not. And that was how Stranger Than the Lifeboat began.
I first became a fan of you through your sports writing, because I'm a tremendous fan. As a Chicago fan, I always think that I suffer the most. But then I look at people who live in Detroit, and I have Rahmanis for you, because I feel like that's the only, maybe Cleveland and Detroit together, but that's the only level below. So you began, I remember watching you on Sunday morning sports reporters on ESPN. I remember reading you and hearing you. And the first time I read Tuesdays with Maury, I couldn't believe that you were the same person, not because the writing was any better or worse, but because these two topics felt completely, right, like two different fields. And yet Tuesdays with Morning, 5 people you meet in heaven, Have a Little Faith, Stranger in the Lifeboat. I feel like you have written more about faith than most rabbis. What has driven you from, that decision, that kind of, intersection in your career where you came to the crossroads and you decided to move in this direction? You've devoted your life to works of Gemilut Chasadim, of acts of loving kindness. You go to Haiti every single month to work in your orphanage there that you've adopted with your wife. What prompted you to change your life in such a drastic way during this time when Jews are forced to reflect on our lives and do tshuva?
Well, it was the experience with Maury when I was 37 years old. I appreciate the nice things you're saying about me, but I feel compelled to point out that they are relatively new in my life. If you take my life as the whole, until I was 37 years old, I was pretty myopic and pretty much just focused on my career, my ambition. My prayers had to do with doing better in my life. Thank God at that point in my life, I hadn't lost anybody. I had one death in my family, but my parents were still alive, and everybody around me. I was just married. All the lights were turning green, and all I wanted was more. And I joke now when I talk about Stranger in the Lifeboat that what I was asking for, my prayers from God when I was 37, was, let me be more successful. Let me get an even higher position at ESPN. Let me make more money on this. Let me get some movies and television things and things I haven't done yet, all under the self-deception of, well, I'm just trying to broaden my talents. But really, a lot of it has to do with, I just want to be bigger. I hate to be so crass, but that was the truth. So what did I get instead? I got a flipping of a remote control, television that showed an old professor of mine who was dying from Lou Gehrig's disease, who I had been very close with when I was back in college. I mean, really close. Not just, I liked him. I took every course he offered. I don't think there was a semester that I wasn't in class with him for 4 years. I wrote my honors thesis with him because I had run out of classes to take with him. We ate lunches together. We walked around campus. I had been to his home multiple times. And then I graduated and never spoke to him again because I was so busy on the trajectory of my career. And then all of a sudden I discover 16 years later that he's dying from Lou Gehrig's disease. I called him up. He kind of guilted me into a one-time visit. One time. He kind of guilted me into a second visit. I am Jewish after all, I respond to that. And a third visit and a fourth visit. And I ended up spending all these Tuesdays with him. And then along the way was exposed to the fact that he didn't have enough money to pay his medical bills. And so I decided, well, I need to help him. How can I help him? The only thing I know how to do is write a book. So I wrote a book. We were lucky to find a publisher. Most publishers said no. It was a terribly long process of rejections and people telling me that's a boring idea. You're a sports writer. You can't write a book like that. So even that was difficult, and we finally found a publisher a few weeks before he died. They gave us just enough money to pay his medical bills, which I did. And then now I was obligated to write the book after he passed away. I wrote the book. They printed a few copies, not very many. And now I was finally going to get back to my sports writing life, albeit it didn't hold the same allure to me anymore because I had gone through this experience of months of just sort of contrasting the 5 or 6 days a week that I was a sports writer and running around. And then this one day when I was sitting still and just listening to a man who was dying talk about what really mattered in life. And there was no connection between what I was hearing on Tuesdays and how I was living my life the rest of the way. And so I was already kind of yin and yanging a little bit when the book came out, but I didn't have much of another path. I was returning to sports writing. And then this book just became something that nobody predicted. And suddenly, wherever I went, people, instead of just like yourself, who used to stop me in airports and say, hey, who's going to win the Super Bowl? And I would say, the Patriots, and I would keep going up the escalator. Now people would stop me and say, I read your book, Tuesdays with Maury, with my mother, who was dying from cancer, and she just died. It was the last thing we did together. Can I talk to you? And now you can't say Patriots and just go up the escalator. You've got to stop. And you've got to talk and you've got to listen. And I stopped and talked and listened to so many people, tens and then hundreds and then thousands of people and thousands, as I said, all these stories, that it changed me. I mean, it has to. You're a rabbi, you know the same thing. You hear your office is open and people come in and tell you their sorrows, their struggles, their difficulties. You're not the same as if you woke up and didn't have to hear any of that. You are changed by the experiences that are shared with you. Well, I was changed by the experiences that were shared with me. And so the questions started to come in my life as I sat down to write other books, no longer like, hey, the Fab Five, that's a good story, I should write that. Or, hey, Bo Schembechler's life story, I should write that, both of which I had done. They didn't hold the same appeal to me. What I sat down and I said, okay, I've met a lot of people who say they die and they really didn't matter, or they thought they didn't matter. They haven't done anything in their life, but that's not really true. Let me write a story about like how you might find out after you die that your life mattered a lot more on earth than you thought it did. And that ended up being the 5 people you meet in heaven. And then I met so many people who talked about if I had my loved one back for one more phone call or one more day, I would do this and I would do this, I would do this. So many people live with these regrets of, I didn't know they were going to die. I would have told them this, I would have told. So I wrote a book about a guy whose mother dies, and he never has a chance to say that. And suddenly he goes back to his hometown to kill himself. And he opens the door to his old house and she's there. And, even though she's been dead for years, she's there again as if nothing happened. And he gets to spend one full day with her. Again, all these things came out of discussions that I had with people who were brokenhearted. And my attention began to just kind of get focused on that. And that's what felt to me like if I'm going to spend a year working on a book, I don't want to spend it talking to a guy about how he developed a jump shot. I want to talk about things that are going to resonate after the book is done. Like, when you throw a pebble in a pond and there's going to be some ripples to it. That's my goal. That's my hope. And I've been writing or trying to write books like that ever since.
I don't know what you do as personal practice during the high holidays. And in some ways, I don't want to know because I feel like it would influence the way I see the books, perhaps. But Yom Kippur is only days away. And there are going to be people sitting in synagogues across the world who are praying. And I know that you feel this kind of weight of the world. What are you praying for this year?